But right now, joining me to go through these stories in a bit more detail is Sophia Worringer, researcher and political commentator. Sophia, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie.
How alarmed are you by this story, the sort of details that we've now seen starting to be unravelled of exactly quite how Chris Cash was working within the walls of Westminster?
I think it's very concerning, and it asks the question, are there more of these so-called agents embedded right at the heart of our political system? And I think what's interesting here is not that he might have had information that was classified, but the sensitive nature of the information he may have been working with that was personal. A lot of the people who work on China-related issues in Westminster have family members who are still living in China or have left Hong Kong for political reasons and still have people that they care about and love there. And the fact he had access or rubbing shoulders at drinks events with these kinds of people is very concerning. And we need to work out whether there are more of these type of people with these connections moving in those Westminster circles.
Yeah, well, the Telegraph is saying that British intelligence services are poised to unmask a number of Chinese spies in the coming months. It does raise, Sophia, there's going to be a big political debate as to whether China is designated as a threat to security. Would that be the right thing to do?
Well, it does look like they're making an intentional effort to get people who will report back to them into the heart of Westminster and gathering this kind of information. This is not the actions of a state that is trying to get closer ties or work collaboratively with us. I think they have very different values. They've been accused of very heinous crimes, and not least against their own people, against the Uyghurs. So they are not working in the same framework from us. And I do think it's important we take that threat seriously and look at the challenges that they're facing to democracy as a whole across the world.
Yeah, so Ian Duncan-Smith, the former Conservative Party leader, said, speaking of China, they are systematically penetrating every institution in the UK. China doesn't every company, he says, in China owes its absolute and total allegiance to the state. You know, it's going to raise significant political debate and discussion today. Let's move on, shall we, to what happened in Wandsworth Prison last week. And the front of the Daily Telegraph is saying that Jeremy Hunt had raised the alert over extremely worrying conditions and staff problems at HMP Wandsworth months before Daniel Khalif escaped from jail. There's been a bit of a political row, hasn't there, Sophia, about exactly who's funding prisons, how much money they should have, because we're trying to establish what it was that meant, was it lack of funding, was it poor staffing, that facilitated someone like Daniel Khalif being able to escape?
Yeah, it is very serious, and I think there is understaffing in the prisons, and it kind of shows that prisons are one of the last in the list to receive public money. It's something that the public don't often support. They think it's not going to impact them, but incidents like this show that the criminal justice system does impact everyone and should be everyone's concern. And whether it was understaffing or whether it was someone inside who was assisting, that's been hinted at by the prisons minister, it is clear that the prison system is struggling and that there needs to be attention taken to the security, the safety, and the purpose of prison, and whether we need more funding for that is a question that will be live and hopefully will be one that is more on the public's mind given the escapee.
It's interesting that you say there about the purpose of prison, because both parties, the Conservatives traditionally, of course, have been the party that say, look, we're the party of law and order. But the Labour Party have really been echoing that recently. They're saying we'll get tough on crime. And, you know, there seems to be some kind of consensus. Shoplifting has been sort of dominating the news quite often, this sort of low-level crime from both parties, that getting tough on crime means putting more people in prison. Are you surprised that the sort of difference between both of those parties seems to be blurring?
I think Labour are very deliberately positioning themselves as this tough on crime narrative. I think they think it flies with the public and it's something the public want. I do think that is true. People want their streets to be safe. But also, I think it's important to understand the kind of the causes of crime as well as being tough on crime itself, and understanding often the intergenerational nature of crime, of how particular families, it can be passed kind of through the generations and the challenges they face, whether that be poverty or lack of opportunities. And that holistic approach to understanding the causes of crime is really important, and one that I hope is added to this debate.
And there'll, of course, be intense scrutiny right now just on Wandsworth Prison. One driver, apparently, who made dozens of trips to the prison, who was sort of delivering light fittings and equipment, said there were no checks of the underneath of the vehicle before leaving the jail. I mean, there are clearly some basic things that just haven't been taking place properly. Who, Sophia, would you blame for sort of failures like this?
Well, I think it's really important that straight away every person who works in that prison is looked at, because it does seem like there was someone inside who was helping. We know that there's very regular arrests and charges brought against prison workers, and contraband is often smuggled in. Prisons are rife with drugs, and some of that may come through staff, and that needs to be looked at. But obviously there will be many staff who are doing a brilliant job and are very motivated to kind of turn lives around through the prison system, and they need to be applauded and supported. But I do think that the issue of funding for prisons and kind of political will on prisons is really important, because it's not something that should be out of sight, out of mind, and they should be higher up the political agenda.
Should we talk about the actions of the Home Secretary over the weekend now? I appreciate this is a difficult story to talk about on the radio, but there is an absolutely galling video that there are stills of inside the Sun newspaper today of this 11-year-old girl who this dog attacks her, and then two men intervene to try and help her, who then also get attacked. And the Home Secretary has branded that it's this breed of dog, the XL bully dog. She says they're a clear and lethal danger, and says she's taking moves to outlaw them in the country. Why do we have a problem with dangerous breeds like this? Do you think this is maybe a little bit late from the Home Secretary to do this?
Well, I think she's right to make it a priority now. Those videos are horrible. I think some of us will have seen them and been very distressed by them. And I know that this breed of dog has been responsible for nearly 3/4 of dog-related deaths since 2022. So they are a particularly aggressive breed and scary for people, and particularly children, where they've been involved in those incidents. It's horrible. I think it's right to make moves to ban their breeding, to ban their sale. But I do worry that a lot of the moving around of these dogs is potentially black market activity. And even if they are made to be illegal, the selling of them will continue, and the fact that they are bred kind of intentionally for this aggression is concerning. So it may take further steps to really get to the heart of this issue.
There's quite a lot of consensus here about, people saying we back the ban from the Home Secretary. Well, let me know what you think about this as well. You can text the programme 87222. Start your message with the word Times. We're going to look at this in the sports news, Sophia, in about 15 minutes' time. But Luis Rubiales, I don't know how many days it is after, 3 weeks after the Women's World Cup final, which I think is remarkable in itself. Normally, something like this happens 3 weeks later after the game. Will we still be discussing it? We are, because of the conduct of Luis Rubiales. Finally, he's held his hands up and said, it's not possible for me to do my job right now, so I've got to resign.
Yeah, but he still says he's innocent, so he's kind of clearly setting the path there. He's going to try and clear his name, but it's clearly not appropriate behaviour, and it's really a shame that it's overshadowed the Spanish team's victory, and really this has still been in the news rather than their achievement at the World Cup final. So it's good that he has resigned, taken at least steps to remove some of the heat from this discussion. But unfortunately, he still protests his innocence. I think a lot of people see that clip online and see that they would have a different opinion there. But I'm sure the processes will be in place now to establish exactly what happened.
It's a very different vibe to what he took 2 weeks ago when he was shouting in this press conference, I will not resign, I will not resign. He is, I think, going to come out with this idea to say, look, I'm the victim of cancel culture here, and turn it into a culture war conversation.
I'm sure he will try that. I don't think many people will be supportive of that position. I think it's kind of a last-ditch attempt to try and retain some of his dignity, his name here. But I think it's important that he's been now kind of out of the scene, and hopefully the focus will return to the Spanish football players and the victory that they secured there.
Now, final thing I want to talk to you about, and this is in The Guardian. Let me just go to page 8. Did you watch any of the proms while it was on TV over the last few weeks or so?
I didn't know, but I was following it in the news.
So I went to a brilliant event, actually. Battersea Park had proms in the park, and the Royal Philharmonic Concert Orchestra were there, and they kind of did a kind of top of the pops version of, what you'd expect from, the best classical hits concert. And it was brilliant. And there were many people who had their flags at the ready. And I'm not sure if they brought them with them or if they were provided by the organisers. But the sight of hundreds of EU flags at the last night of the proms has prompted outrage from Brexiteers. Does it matter, Sophia, what flag you wave at the proms, and should it cause so much disquiet?
Well, I think it was a group of people outside who were handing them out for free, and many people would have taken a flag, fun thing to wave at the proms. But ultimately, if it was an organised protest, it doesn't really reflect the views of the nation, which, as we know, voted to leave the European Union. So I wouldn't get too upset about it.
Yeah, so it's the pro-European group of music lovers called Thank EU for the Music organised the display, handed out thousands of EU flags outside the Royal Albert Hall. We talk so often, don't we, about, how do you protest? Maybe this was a genuine form of peaceful protest, or just a way to get your message across that wasn't going to harm.
Exactly. I don't think people should get too upset about it. People want to wave a flag, they can, but we know that lots of people voted to leave the EU, and that wish has been listened to. So I think it's a legitimate way of protest. Obviously, welcome free protests in this country, but the last night of the proms is a issue that's way bigger than what flag you wave, and it's a way of bringing people together and celebrating good music and cultural heritage. And I think that's the most important thing to remember from the last night of the proms.
Sophia, thank you so much. Sophia Worringer, a researcher and political commentator, going through some of the stories inside the papers with me.